seconds, the crowd goes wild. Jake Paul tries one last move. Anthony Joshua responds with perfect timing. It's over.
Let me be honest with you right now. What we just witnessed does not feel real. Like, I don't care how long you've been watching boxing, how many freak show fights you've seen, how many influencer cards you've laughed at. This one hit different. Because Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua actually happened. Not in a headline, not in a rumor, not in a what-if clip on Twitter. It just went down. And the entire boxing world is in absolute shock. I'm talking fighters, trainers, promoters, legends, casual fans, hardcore purists. Everyone is reacting at the same time. Group chats are blowing up. Podcasts are scrambling. Fighters are jumping on social media trying to process what they just watched. And what makes this moment even crazier is this. People warned us. People predicted this. People laughed it off. So today, instead of just replaying the fight, we're doing something way more interesting. We're breaking down how the boxing world reacted, what fighters said before the fight, and whether those predictions aged like wine or aged like milk. Because love him or hate him, Jake Paul just dragged the entire sport into one of the most surreal nights in boxing history. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why this fight might be the single biggest turning point influencer boxing has ever had. When the final bell rang, it felt like the sport froze for a second. There was this weird pause. Not cheering, not booing, just disbelief. Because whether you think the result went exactly how it should have, or whether you were secretly hoping for chaos, the fact that Anthony Joshua and Jake Paul shared a ring in a real, sanctioned heavyweight boxing fight still feels insane. This wasn't an exhibition. This wasn't a celebrity sparring session. This wasn't some charity event with headgear. This was a former two-time heavyweight champion of the world, Olympic gold medalist, fighting a YouTuber who turned himself into a real professional boxer in front of millions on Netflix. And the reactions started instantly. Within minutes, fighters were tweeting things like, "Boxing is wild. I can't believe we just saw that. This sport is changing in real time." Some were laughing, some were furious, some were genuinely impressed, but nobody was ignoring it. And that's where this story really starts. Before the fight ever happened, the boxing world was split into three camps. You had the group that believed Anthony Joshua was going to absolutely destroy Jake Paul. No discussion needed. You had the group that thought it was dangerous, irresponsible, and shouldn't be sanctioned at all. And then you had the smaller, quieter group that kept saying, "Don't underestimate Jake. Something weird could happen." Joe Rogan was one of the loudest voices warning people that this wasn't a joke. Anthony Joshua isn't just big, he's a one-punch eraser. Rogan's take was simple and brutal. Jake Paul stepping in with a former unified heavyweight champion wasn't brave, it was dangerous. He kept repeating that this wasn't influencer boxing anymore. This was heavyweight physics, and physics doesn't care about confidence. Tyson Fury's camp laughed it off at first, but Fury still made one thing clear. He said if AJ takes this seriously, it won't last long. Fury's angle wasn't emotional, it was dismissive. In his words, Joshua had already fought real killers, real heavyweights, real pressure. Fury framed Jake Paul as entertainment walking into a professional environment that eats people alive. Those voices were drowned out for months. Daniel Dubois didn't sugarcoat it at all. His take was that Jake Paul wouldn't even make it into deep waters. He said AJ hits differently, not just hard, but heavy. Dubois pointed out that cruiserweights and MMA crossovers don't prepare you for heavyweight timing and weight transfer. His prediction was an early stoppage if Joshua pressed the gas. Because on paper, this matchup made no sense. Anthony Joshua is a natural heavyweight who spent his entire adult life fighting elite competition. Jake Paul is a former cruiserweight influencer who built his boxing career step by step in front of the internet. And yet, when the fight was officially announced, something shifted. Fighters weren't just dismissing it anymore, they were actually debating it. One of the loudest reactions in the build-up came from heavyweight fighters themselves. Guys who've shared the ring with Anthony Joshua. Guys who know exactly what that power feels like. The consistent message was the same. He only needs one. If AJ touches him clean, it's over. This is heavyweight boxing, not YouTube boxing. And those weren't insults. Those were warnings. Several heavyweights openly said they were uncomfortable with the matchup. Not because they hate Jake Paul, but because they know what heavyweight punches do to people. Some even said they wouldn't want that responsibility on their conscience. At the same time, though, there was something interesting happening. Every time a fighter said, "This is dangerous," they followed it with, "But I respect him for taking it." That dual reaction never went away. Fear mixed with respect. Then you had the former champions weighing in. Guys who've already been through the machine of boxing politics, big money fights, and career-defining moments. They didn't talk about technique first. They talked about timing. They said this wasn't just about whether Jake could win or lose. This was about leverage. Jake Paul fighting Anthony Joshua wasn't random. It wasn't reckless. It was calculated. They pointed out that Jake didn't need to beat Joshua to win in the bigger picture. He just needed to survive, compete, and prove he belonged on that stage. And that perspective started creeping into the conversation more and more. This fight wasn't just about fists, it was about positioning. Then came the training footage. And this is where reactions started to change dramatically. When Anthony Joshua's training clips dropped, fighters reacted exactly how you'd expect. Sharp, focused, mean. People said he looked locked in, calm, dangerous, like a guy who understood the assignment and wasn't treating this like a joke. But when Jake Paul's camp footage started circulating, the tone shifted. Not because it looked bad, because it looked serious. Fighters started noticing things. They pointed out his patience. They pointed out his composure. They pointed out that he wasn't fighting emotionally anymore. That's when a few boxers quietly said something that shocked fans. "He's improved more than people want to admit." That sentence alone made people uncomfortable. As fight night got closer, the predictions became more extreme. Some fighters doubled down, saying Joshua would finish it early and that anything else would be embarrassing. Others said Jake's confidence was delusional and would finally get exposed at the highest level. But a few voices started saying something different. They said heavyweight boxing is unpredictable. They said pressure does strange things. They said AJ has more to lose than people realize. And when those clips resurfaced after the fight, the internet went crazy. Because some of those takes aged way better than expected. After the fight ended, the reactions exploded in waves. The first wave was pure emotion. Shock, laughter, silence. You had fighters posting things like, "Boxing is not real anymore," followed by, "Nah, respect though." You had legends saying, "This is not what I grew up watching," while still admitting they watched every second. You had younger fighters saying, "This is the future whether you like it or not." And then came the second wave, analysis. This is where things got really interesting. Boxers started rewatching the fight not as fans, but as professionals. They weren't talking about hype anymore. They were talking about moments. They talked about how Jake handled the opening pressure. They talked about how Joshua managed distance. They talked about energy, pacing, nerves. Some fighters admitted something shocking. They said the fight didn't look as one-sided as they expected in real time. That alone changed the conversation. Because for months, the narrative was that this would be a mismatch so obvious it wouldn't even be competitive. But after seeing it play out, fighters started saying, "Okay, this wasn't insane, not equal, not elite versus elite, but not a joke." And that distinction matters. Then came the respect phase. Even fighters who were openly critical before the fight started acknowledging Jake Paul in a new way. They said he showed courage. They said he didn't quit. They said he didn't embarrass himself. And in boxing, that's a massive shift. Because boxing doesn't hand out respect easily, especially to outsiders, especially to influencers. One of the biggest talking points post-fight was this question: did this fight officially end the debate about whether Jake Paul is a real boxer? And the answer from fighters wasn't unanimous, but it leaned in one direction. They said he's not elite. They said he's not championship level. But they also said he's not fake. And that middle ground is where things get dangerous. Because once you're no longer dismissed, expectations change. Then the conversation widened. This wasn't just about Jake and AJ anymore. Fighters started asking bigger questions. Is this the peak of influencer boxing? Is this the moment it becomes fully integrated into the sport? Or is this the last time a crossover fight reaches this level? Some fighters argued this was the absolute ceiling. You can't go bigger than a former heavyweight champion on Netflix. Others argued the opposite. They said this opened doors nobody thought were possible. And when fighters disagree like that, it means something real shifted. Promoters reacted differently. They didn't talk about legacy. They talked about numbers. They talked about reach. They talked about global attention. Some even admitted they underestimated how massive this would be. And when promoters admit that publicly, you know the industry is recalibrating. Then you had the purists, the old-school boxing voices. They were angry. They were disappointed. They were frustrated. But even they couldn't deny one thing. Everyone watched. And that's the uncomfortable truth sitting at the center of this entire conversation. As more fighter reactions poured in, one theme kept repeating. This fight didn't kill boxing. It didn't save boxing. It exposed boxing. It showed how fractured the sport is, how desperate for attention it can be, and how powerful storytelling has become. Jake Paul didn't just fight Anthony Joshua. He forced the entire boxing world to react, and that's influence. Now, the big question fighters are asking is what comes next. Does Jake Paul step back down? Does he chase another massive name? Does he pivot entirely? Fighters are split. Some say this was his final boss. Others say this just unlocked new options. And Anthony Joshua? Fighters reacted to him in a very specific way. They didn't say he lost respect. They didn't say he gained it either. They said he did his job, which, in boxing language, says a lot. So when you zoom out and look at the reactions, something becomes clear. This fight wasn't about crowning a winner. It was about redefining what's possible. And love it or hate it, the boxing world just witnessed a moment it will be arguing about for years. So I want to know what you think. Were the fighters right in their predictions? Did Jake Paul exceed expectations? Was this the peak of influencer boxing, or just the beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because whether you like it or not, boxing just changed again, and we all watched it happen together.